Hello, welcome to the Mark Attwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. How's it going? Well, very interesting thing happened this morning. I saw a tweet, can't remember who it was from, and it was linking to an article of a counsellor in Ireland being published in a local media outlet saying there is a link between and those words you can't say. And the article was interesting because it's a local politician. And secondly, it was in a local media outlet, the same local media outlets that in this country, as in most countries, have stonewalled anybody saying anything about anything. So is this a crack in the dam? Very possibly. I wrote to the councillor this morning and tried to explain, because one of the things he was saying was, isn't it time for the government to do something? Well, I don't think he fully understands that the government did it. So I don't know if I'll get anywhere with that, but I did make a video about it, which I'm going to be posting after a few judicial edits later. Now, during this spiritual war that we're in, on the front line have been, of course, the doctors. We know this, and very few doctors have. I'm just looking here to one side, is quite amusing that I happen to have this book close to hand. Thank you, Lindsay, for that. Haven't read it yet. Yes, I have. I've read enough of it. I've been following the story for so long. I feel like I could have written it, to be honest. But a few doctors have spoken out. A few of those doctors have spoken over here at one of my events, and I've been trying to interview as many as I can over the years. People like Dr. Christiane Northrup, who was in the top 100 most trusted people in America list for 20 odd years, regular on Oprah for a while, and a wonderful woman who's been completely cut off, but she's doing amazing things over in Maine and in America and using her platform for positive effects. Other people, maybe not so lucky in terms of, when I say lucky, I mean, some of them haven't made it, actually. Dr. Rashid Buttar. But in England, there's been one doctor who actually got two of the things before he realized there was an issue. And he's been dragged over the coals. I've mentioned this on recent videos in a way that has been horrific to watch from the sidelines. I mean, my heart and spirit is with him, but he's with us now. Please welcome Dr. David Cartland. How you doing, David?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, it's a depressing story, as you just outlined. Really, having the cojones to change your view. I was a bit ambivalent, really, about the jab. We're not allowed to say the word, are we?
Well, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna keep a little notebook about the times when you mention things that I'm gonna have to cut out to put it on YouTube, and then we'll put the uncensored version on my Substack and Rumble and X. But
I got you in trouble already by saying the J.
It's all right. It's all right. Don't worry.
Okay, but yeah, as I was saying, I was ambivalent to it all. We were watching the TV, seeing all these ridiculous things about people collapsing in the streets and bat eating, wet fish markets, and all the nonsense. But we really did try and prepare ourselves for the next apocalypse, and kind of never happened. I won't go into the reasoning for the two whats, but there were reasons at the time, stupid. But as critical thinkers, we're allowed to change our mind, and I think a lot of the vocal doctors who have ended up getting in trouble have taken some themselves, and ended up being damaged or affected by them, and hence their vocality. But yeah, just doing my job, really. I keep saying to people, I chose some easy lanes, really. I went for ethics, informed consent, non-coercion of experimental things, and then moved on to children, pregnant women. Why are we doing this? What's the clinical rationale? Practicing this kind of voodoo thing called evidence-based medicine, where you're doing the research. Unfortunately, at the beginning, I did trust what was coming from above. And as I mentioned, I didn't really pay much attention, even to know what was going into the arm, as it were. But yeah, it made me really sick personally. And then I was just sat there seeing patients in my little village surgery, and people were getting ill from this. And they were volunteering that to me. It wasn't that I was suggesting it or trying to twist their arm in any way. It was their version of events. I've had this, and 2 or 3 days later, that's happened. So, we keep hearing about correlation doesn't equal causation, but, there is a principle, there's a Bradford Hill criteria, it's called. It's an epidemiological tool where if you haven't got a test that will say, yes, it is, no, it isn't, then you have to use principles such as, is there a plausible mechanism? Is there a temporal relationship between something going into your arm and then something developing, etc., etc.? So, yeah, I followed the Bradford Hill criteria quite a lot. And, yeah, the trouble started coming because I kind of questioned my own surgery when they were going for children, teenagers, saying, why are you doing this? And they're privately saying to me, no, we're not going to be giving this in our surgery. And then only the next day, they're deploying staff down at the abattoir and jabbing your 12 to 17-year-olds whilst telling me in the coffee room they're not going to get their own children medically treated, I'll put it that way, with this I don't know what words I can't use, Mark. I don't want to get you.
Let's try and use code, but it doesn't matter if you
carrot. I think is a good one.
I mean, I don't know what level the censorship is at the moment, but we've been taken down so many times. No, and before you're blurting a lot, which is great, and I want this to be seen by people that don't necessarily know who you are. You were a GP for how long?
I qualified 2008. I'm just looking at my certificate now. It's next to me. So I was as a doctor in 2008, qualified as a GP 2014, but kind of dual trained really. I kind of went through the ranks in accident and emergency, made it to sort of the middle grade rota, which is a step underneath a consultant, and then decided to diversify with a sort of generalist primary care career. And again, across that arena, I was doing urgent care, GP and A&E roles, homeless GP roles, as well as standard 9 till 6 GP as well. So yeah, quite a lot of 17-year career. It would have been this year, 17 years and 25 years left to give. Unfortunately, wasn't meant to be.
Well, it's not over yet, David. That's the first thing. Now, when we first met, I think it was a couple of years ago, I asked you a question. Do you remember the question? I said, why did you doctors not read the ingredients? And you said no. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I remember that. I didn't even inquire about the ingredients when I had mine.
So this was a question I was asking 5 years ago when I started this podcast, and I was trying to say to people, please don't take it. You don't know what's in it. And it blew, and I was calling out, where are the doctors? Where are the awake doctors? Where, they can't all be bad. And then once you realize they're not all bad, then your next question is, well, they must be not reading the ingredients. They must be not. And why is that? What explain to the viewers why that is?
Well, I mean, even in 2025, people still don't know that it's a novel technology. This was a novel mRNA-based platform. That there's a lot of pharma money invested into that in various new formats as well. So this really needed to work. I guess doctors are also subject to the usual propaganda, the psyops, military grade at times, the fear porn, as I call it. People were watching the BBC in the evenings over a glass of wine and seeing, people with hazmat suits on and, goggle imprinted, gaunt faces, stressed from their day's behaviour. And we all believed it. But then you start hearing about crisis actors and, I actually visited hospitals myself and they were empty. But yeah, to answer the question about ingredients, yeah, it should be first thing you do. Anything you eat, anything you consume, anything you inject into your body, you should be checking on the ingredients. And, I've said that about the childhood vaccine schedule. There's a lot of people that come to me for advice about, is it safe in the light of what's happened in the last few years? And, there's so many things that are in those vials that isn't the actual, nobody would argue, for example, about introducing a small amount of an antigen so that your body can be sort of pre-prepared for it. That's what immunization is. But it's actually what's in that vial. For example, there's aluminium hydroxide, polyethyl glycol, there's polysorbate, and all these things we don't know enough about, yet we're injecting it into pregnant women and children without any knowledge of its reproductive toxicity, its biodistribution, its potential for carcinogenicity, cancer causing. So yeah, really every doctor should, particularly when they're jabbing massive cohorts of general public with something that they haven't got the first clue about, and essentially turning people into mass antigen factories, which is what's turned out to be the case.
So what was it that happened with you that made you go, oh, there's a problem? And you said you had patients coming in and they were having problems, and you'd had two yourself. Did you? What did you
Well, I mean,
feel?
I was ill myself for the first one. I was in bed for 3 days with the most bizarre headaches, and it just felt like electric shocks that was zapping down my spine. Never experienced anything like it since. Never had anything like it before, and it wiped me out. And after that, that was pretty much it. The second one, came pretty much without any side effects. But about 3 months later, I started to notice personally that my brain power had been reduced somewhat. My previously photographic memory was, I felt like I was getting dementia, to be honest. I was doing interviews like this and getting my words jumbled and really forgetting, brain fog as well, fatigue. And about the same time, and it always seemed to me that it was the boost to the third dose where things really did kick off, seeing things physically in my own clinic room. And as I say, patients coming in saying, and there were large clusters. There was the odd one or two after the second and first, odd reactions, mainly local reactions really. But then it really did kick off with the big stuff like the strokes in younger people, the myopericarditis, odd autoimmune reactions and reactive arthritis, and then death. It was a eureka moment week for me, where I was working in this little surgery in Cornwall. We had 2 deaths, 40-year-old women, death by 1,000 clots. It was vaccine-induced thrombocytic thrombocytopenia on both death certificates. That was confirmed by a coroner post-mortem. I had to make the condolence call to the one husband, widow. And on the same day as that second certificate came in, we had a chap collapse, a 41-year-old collapse in our local city, Truro. He had a cerebral venous thrombosis, and I checked his notes, and he'd had the clot. He had a blood clot 24 hours or less than after he had the Astra. And all these 3 occasions within 1 week were to do with the AstraZeneca. And I just said to my boss at the time, look, these are never events, and there's 3 events in a week. We need to stop giving it. And he just threw his hands up in the air and just said, what do you want me to do about it? And he said something disturbing, and I remember it to this day. The show must go on. The show must go on. Whatever he meant by that, I don't know. And he went on to vaccinate 500-600 local Penzance members of the public, knowing what I'd just told him, 2 deaths and a massive brain blood clot from one particular brand, and yet still administered it. And I've seen that through my years now. People who had myocarditis, pericarditis, and are not willing to have any more jabs. We saw the uptake was really, really low after the second. The NHS staff smelt a rat. You've seen that with the flu this year. There's been poor uptake all throughout. So what are the doctors and nurses seeing that leads for them to say no? Obviously, yeah. But then they're advertising it. It's on every Facebook pop-up advert at the moment. If you're pregnant, get your 4 jabs. I mean, the RSV, Rota, the C1, and flu. And it's just like, I tell pregnant women to stop eating cheese, sit down, relax, live a healthy life, don't get stressed, quit all the bad habits. But it's okay to have an mRNA-based liquid placed upon your arm. That passes through the placenta. We know that. My position was always, premature claims of safety. People on the TV, all the usual government officials standing proudly saying 100% safe. One of my victims, in inverted commas, with the GMC was an obstetrician who said very early on, whilst running a trial to see if it was safe in pregnancy, stated as fact it was 100% safe long term. So I called her out, as I would. You're telling pregnant women something safe when pregnant women were excluded from the trial. So where's your data? So I ended up writing her a very polite email asking for her to send the details of the data. And if she didn't provide it, I would report her to the GMC. That was hashed into the GMC's accusation that I threatened retaliatory action towards a female colleague. That was a proven charge, and one of many that the GMC threw at me. But yeah, my speaking out caused me a lot of trouble. I'm sure we'll cover that as we go on.
Yeah, I mean, your speaking out has caused a hell of a lot of trouble, and but in many ways, it's kind of highlighted the issue. It's we'll get to that in a minute, because you went to your boss, he put his hands up in the air and said, "The show must go on." And how did you react to that?
The show must go on. I quit that day. I quit the surgery. Yeah, I quit the surgery. So, and this happened with the other surgery where they were saying they wouldn't vaccinate their own children, and yet they sent staff and deployed them to vaccinate your children. I found it ethically deplorable. And so I quit that surgery, and that's when the fun and games happen, really. It was I tried in-house to let the practice managers know at the surgeries I worked at. I tried to do little audits to say, look, all the people that are getting alleged COVID from the PCR tests have all had 2 jabs to stop them getting COVID. And all the people in hospital with alleged COVID are, they're double jabbed to stop them going into hospital with COVID. So then the penny didn't really drop with these people. They were, tin hat wearing conspiracy theorists. And, I took in papers some days saying, well, this study shows, adolescents developing myocarditis after the, what, and a massive study in Korea. And I remember being pushed by the physio. He said, this is my downtime. I want to, this is coffee break. I don't want to listen to your conspiracy theories. And it's like, it's the Journal of American Medical Association. It's a massive prospective cohort study. Didn't want to know conspiracy theory. And that's what we've seen through the 5 years. These guys haven't got anything to bring to the table. But I haven't debated a single doctor face to face. Any of my colleagues, just recently we've had this excess death running through the mainstream media. Last weekend it was coming out publicly that the UK HSA had refused or supported the decision to not release the vaccine status of these excess deaths that keep happening year on year since a certain rollout, because it will cause alarm and distress. So we all know, how do you say something without saying something, and just hiding the evidence, really, just absolutely mad. Every doctor knows now, Mark. Every doctor knows without a shadow of a doubt. I sent that article out to every doctor in my phone book, every single one. All of them blue ticked quite quickly. Never got a reply. I used to send a lot of, generally interesting anti-vax stuff, apparently. Journals, published data, UK government data to all of the doctors that I knew. And never got responses because it's so damning, I don't know what these people need to stop to lead to a moratorium of this stuff. I don't know how clear it can be now. And I've watched, as my colleagues you mentioned earlier, there's only a few that have spoken out. I've watched them be picked off one at a time by the General Medical Council. How can you be getting a fair trial when they actually invest in big pharma? They invest the membership fees into Merck and AstraZeneca, funnily enough. You're not going to get a fair trial, and I certainly didn't get a fair trial, but I watched every single brave, the Irish doctors as well, getting battered in their regulator tribunals and picked off one by one. I think I was one of the last men standing, and I wasn't standing too well at the end, to be honest with you.
No, I know. But, I did a video the other day that you shared on X, which was a friend of mine had a doctor relative who was I got told the story. They've woken up, yet they're continuing to deliver the drugs. And I'm like, well, I don't get that. How's that? Have you got an answer for that?
Well, we had 3 nurses at the last surgery I ever worked at, all had myopericarditis after the jab. Every one of them. One of them was still getting cardiological input and she couldn't do any exercise. It really affected her. The other 2 were more transient, but all 3 had agreed categorically we will not be having any more of the jabs. Like the other 80% of the NHS that are, quote, anti-vaxxers that refused any more than 2. And yet they jumped for joy when the Autumn 23 booster campaign was announced by the practice manager and took a lead on administration and organisation of it. They're actually quite excited because they're saying it doesn't have to be a patient now. Anyone can walk in off the street unregistered and get their latest booster. And they were kind of like delighted. And I was trying to think, well, 2 days ago in the coffee room, you just said about your health issues, serious health issues. We're talking about heart inflammation, and yet you're still willing to administer it. So this was another surgery that I left in haste because on that last day there, I saw a 5-year-old, and it was a disturbing case. It was a chap who brought his 5-year-old son in. He hadn't been well for a month. General malaise, lethargy, pushing his food around the plate, not taking part in his exercise in school, just sitting, being listless. I said, what happened a month ago? Has he changed diet, any medication, etc.? And he said, no, he had that flu spray. So I pulled up his vaccine record and he'd had the flu spray. And then I saw below it Comirnaty, which is the brand for COVID jab. He'd been administered that at the same time. And I said to the dad, what are you thinking? He's 5 years old. He's not going to die of COVID. What are you doing giving him this experimental treatment? And he said, you're telling me that the surgery have given my son a COVID vaccine? And I said, yeah. And his face changed, his demeanour changed. I don't think the dad knew that the son had it, which leaves 2 options. They've either, put that he's had it administered and he hasn't, and they're claiming the money. Or the second thing is that they've covertly administered it whilst they're spraying him up the nose and getting him in the arm. And so I left again, because again, ethics is important in medicine. And if you start, being flexible around ethics and patient safety, then it's not a place I want to work. So yeah, it's quite a lucrative job as well. That was I walked away from. decent
No, I
money.
know.
But
Well, I was
just
going to ask you, do you think it's money, or do you think it's something else that's keeping them at it?
well, I mean, they made a bit of money off it. They didn't make big bucks. I think it's something like 15 quid to start with, and then the boosters, as it went down to 10, they were whinging about that. But they were getting, several thousand people through what I call the Jaboteur. So do the maths. So they were making a bit of money on top of their usual global sums and quaff points and all the other bits of money, but certainly wasn't buying any Jaguars. But I think once they started supporting it, the safe and effective narrative, then you've put your chips on black, haven't you? And you've placed your bet, and you've got to then keep up the facade. And I think they kept just waiting for it to go away. We keep hearing that in the last few weeks. The doctor saying, "Oh, that was so, that's in the past."
I know.
People's amputated legs, they're not going to forget. People's inability to walk because of Guillain-Barré, they're not going to forget. People's being a widower because they've lost their husband or wife, they're not going to forget that. So, quit your ostrich syndrome, as I call it. That was the real pandemic. Psyops, there's buyer's remorse. If you got to really stick with the narrative that you've chose. As I mentioned, the chips went down on black and it turned out it was red, to use a roulette analogy. But yeah, I mean, these guys, they've also had it themselves. So you don't want to hear from this loudmouth Cornish doctor telling you about all the dangers of spike protein accumulating in your body and the fact that there's no apparent off switch. The biodistribution, we knew. I mean, I was told it stayed in my arm for a few hours, and then you only have to scratch the surface of about the 5th page of the Pfizer documents, and it shows that it was widely distributed. In fact, every part of the body. More troublingly, it was the gonads, the ovaries and testes, and bone marrow of the rats. So it's just a shock. It's an absolute. Yeah, I won't say my true thoughts because I don't want your channel to be affected.
Well, I'm past caring about that sort of thing, really. I just want to get the word out to as many people as possible. But when that happened, when you realized this, your whole world must have fallen apart because firstly, you realized that the profession you are in, or you trained to be in, because I know you're a dedicated, brilliant doctor, suddenly the rug was pulled from under your feet. Not only about the jabs, but presumably up to that point, you didn't know that there was a plan to depopulate the world, or that there was a new world order plan, or any of that stuff. Were you aware of any conspiracy theories up to that point?
No, I was wet behind the ears, very much so. I used to watch the BBC of an evening, and believe what it said. I had the jabs even when I did have them, it wasn't with full commitment. The second jab was being chased around because the mandate was coming, and it was a sort of, I've got kids and a house and a big mortgage, and I won't explain the exact words of non-consent, but I pulled up my sleeve and said, for bleep's sake, just get on with it. They've been chasing me around for 10 weeks. So it wasn't like a volitional thing, it was coercive. And yeah, it's a shame because, you stand up, I talk about in the book that I stood up and recited quite proudly my Hippocratic oath. It's become the hypocritical oath now because unfortunately these doctors, I keep saying, you're getting up in the morning, you get your scrubs on or your nurse's tunic and you get your equipment ready and you have your Weetabix ready for the day with the hope that you're going to help some punters, help them heal. And then you end up going into work and forget all these ethical principles. You forget to keep up to date with evidence and data. There's no excuses for that. I know they've kept doctors and nurses busy, but there's always time to research, and it's a professional obligation to keep up to date. And when the data so early on was so damning, it's like, what more of a eureka moment do you want? And, I was asking doctors, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? In a day, I've seen 3 or 4 or 5 people out of 30 patients that have reported vaccine adverse events. Now, are you guys seeing it? And they say, no. I mean, I spoke to a neurologist just recently, a colleague, a really good friend, and he said, I've never seen a vaccine injury, categorically stated, considering there's been a massive uptick in neurological multisystemic adverse events. And he said to me, Dave, I've never seen a vaccine injury. I mean, it's just absurd, absolutely absurd, while I was seeing 4 or 5 a day in general practice. Gaslighting as well, the gaslighting that was going on. Everyone who's been injured by this stuff, they get the same treatment. No correlation doesn't equal causation. Absolutely not. Even though it was yesterday you had it and today your arms fell off. Couldn't be the jab. And this is going on. And the same people who are peddling the correlation isn't causation is a real example. A female, 29, nurse was wheeled into my room with a chest infection. She had an AstraZeneca jab and had a small blood clot about a week or 2 after. So they didn't think about giving her a different second one. They gave her another AstraZeneca, and lo and behold, she gets a massive clot in the other leg, and she needed surgery and embolectomy. And then for her 29th birthday, her 30th birthday, she was given the gift of a Moderna booster. Anyway, the next day she had a mini stroke, and the week after, to the day, 7 days, she had a full stroke, knocked out one side of her body, swallowing reflex. She couldn't speak, peg fed, so through a tube into the stomach. And guess what the cause of her stroke a week after the Moderna was? It was asymptomatic long COVID. Just get your head around that for a concept. It was a week after that injection, but it wasn't actually the injection, according to the neurosurgeon, the stroke doctor, the GP, coded in her notes. It was an infection she never knew she had because she had no symptoms and didn't test positive for, striking her some months after. No one knows how many months, because she had no symptoms of this deadly killer disease. So that's the logic that's being applied in the medical profession, and this woman believed that her stroke was to do with long COVID. She did. I mean, this is a catch-all. And I had this conversation with the senior partner, and that ended up with him asking me never to come back to the surgery ever again. Up at Port Isaac it was, and where they filmed Doc Martin. And lovely surgery, got on really well. But I just couldn't stand the gaslighting. Not only did she believe it, but the doctors believed it. And he just kept repeating like a cultist. It's correlation doesn't equal causation. Where's your proof it was the vaccine day? I was like, well, where's your bloody proof it's long COVID that was asymptomatic X amount of months ago? No one knows. But it was fixed on it that it was, and there was no other option. And a lot of these vaccine injuries now, a lot of them are actually long. They're being told they're long COVID, but 99.9% are vaccine. Or they've started to use the phrase, aren't they? Post-vaccine syndrome. That sort of crap.
Long COVID is just the name for vaccine injury, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's been studies. I mean, the Lancet even published something 2 years ago looking at long COVID coding in primary care, a massive cohort study, and you could literally overlay the graphs on that particular document, saying, the amount of jabs. So it correlated perfectly with the long COVID sufferers that all had X amount of jabs. And unfortunately, long COVID doesn't tend to affect the unjabbed. Fact. I know one or two people that claim it, but there's reasons for that without going into too much detail, the shedding, etc. But essentially, it's a spike protein disorder. It's a new pathogen, and it causes absolute biological chaos. I see these people every day. It causes everything from immune system dysfunction and cancer, protein deposition disorders, autoimmunity, chronic inflammation, blood clots, small and large. The list goes on. I could keep going, but yeah, that's the problem when you turn a human cell into a non-human protein factory with no off switch that's distributed everywhere around your body. It's not difficult as a concept. Had I known that, would I have let them jab me? No, absolutely not. Didn't know. Ignorance. Can't explain it.
You mentioned the Hippocratic Oath. Did you see the talk that Ian McDermott did over here last month or the month before?
Yes, I did. Yes,
he said that because I mean I was talking about the Hippocratic Oath 5 years ago. So what happened to that? And Ian said that they don't actually sign it. Did you sign it? What's the situation?
Yeah, I was in one of the last few years, to be honest. 2008, it started to phase out. It sort of became optional if you stood up and recited it.
Really?
Yeah, it was optional. I stood up proudly, as I talk about in the book, and not many people didn't. I'll be honest at that point. But then you start hearing that it was phased out, and I don't know how long it's been now, but it's completely optional. In the privacy of your own home, you swear your Hippocratic Oath, not at the qualifying ceremonies, which is a shame because the principle is do no harm. Like, who wouldn't sign up to that? Who wouldn't?
No, exactly. And I think a lot of people assume that's the case, which is, one of the criticisms leveled for podcasters and people like me is, well, you know better than a doctor. And I'm like, well, apparently, yes, I do, because
I've had many academic discussion with my window cleaner, gardener, Morrison's delivery driver. They know the data, they know what's going on, and respectfully, when you have a conversation with academics at the top of their game, and we're talking about hematologists and immunologists and oncologists, these are doctors that should be and will be seeing the peaks in weird blood films and the spike in young aggressive cancers. Absolute cowardice to not be speaking out. But I think this is part of the woes I got into, Mark. Really, it was let's make an example of this this guy and all of his mates, 10, 15 of us, and we've all been picked off. And I hear it so often, apart from pensions and careers and kids and private education and all those excuses, financially motivated, the other flip side is, well, we've seen what they've done to you. It's, I hear that every day, and it's that prohibitive effect of, making examples of these reprobate doctors who dare to exercise ethics and evidence-based practice and go against the big pharma narrative. I mean, my GMC case was it's criminal. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to challenge these things, not only to represent myself in the tribunal, but to appeal, it would have been 25 grand plus VAT, and if you lose, you pay GMC's costs. It's not as if they didn't bring in expensive top barrister. In fact, the top barrister in the country, head of the CPS, was the legal qualified chair on mine, bearing in mind the case was about calling out 3 doctors that had basically told massive whoppers on TV, calling that out. If you're going to tell pregnant women it's 100% safe long term, when long term hasn't even happened, then I'm going to call you out on a patient safety principle. But they managed to cobble together this: the doctors are just following orders and they're following NHS guidance, and this anti-vax conspiracy theorist is bringing negative attention to them. And God forbid, I wrote 5 letters to support 5 individuals' bodily autonomy, to refuse, a valid refusal of consent with capacity. It's a real thing in medicine. I use Jehovah's Witnesses as an example. Blood. I can't give a Jehovah's Witness blood, even if I'm going to save their life. And I've actually lost 2 Jehovah's Witnesses in A&E crash scenarios, car accidents, because I couldn't. To do so would be assault and battery, criminally prosecutable. So yeah, I've wrote 5 exemptions, support the bodily autonomy, and the medical reason was primum non nocere, as per the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And that was a letter that went into 5 people's handbags to do some trips to see dying relatives. GMC called it falsification of medical notes for money, which is dishonest and irremediable behaviour. And they kept using this dishonest word just because I'd done these 5 vaccine exemptions. And then the final thing, I called a practice out that said that I sent my CV into this really poor practice. It's always getting complaints and sending all their patients to A&E. Applied 2 degrees, masters, all my clinical skills in a CV. They shredded it within 2 hours and replied back to me and said, you're an anti-vaxxer. No, a rabid anti-vaxxer, sorry. A rabid anti-vaxxer from a Google search. So thank you for applying, but you don't fit the ethos of our surgery. So I put it on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere saying, you can't get an appointment at this surgery. And they just won an award for non-discrimination as well. So that was just quite funny to see. And 4 times this person had complained about me for posting a fully redacted email. I named the surgery. She went on to say that I had encouraged hate mail towards the surgery, and it made her anxious and caused her alarm and distress. Oh. The hate mail was 3 individuals, 2 individuals and a group: World Council for Health, Mike Eden, and a retired guy called John, an accountant, 70-year-old, who sent the woman the Pfizer documents, the Pfizer trial data, saying, if you're giving this jab, you need to be understanding what happened in the trial, which was a shambles anyway. That's hate mail, according to the GMC. There's a lot of things that were twisted with the accusations. I've got a position on trans stuff, trans women in particular wanting to dance and prance around children. I used to do safeguarding as a GP. Now, if an adult came into my clinic room in women's suspenders and stockings and was dancing and touching the kid in a certain way, I'd be concerned under safeguarding principle. So I was very public about that, saying, where's the safeguarding concerns being raised here? You've got these events where there's very sexualized content, and it's coming from a trans community. Anyway, the GMC cobbled that into a Dr Cartland shows hostility to the LGBTQ plus community simply for calling out the trans part of it, the T bit. I've got loads of support in the LG and B communities about it, and they align the views with me. But again, the headline was Cartland's transphobic, homophobic, and all the rest of it, which is pretty damaging, pretty damaging to a reputation. And the local rag wrote a hit piece that was entitled "Inside the Warped Mind of Dodgy Dr David Cartland and His Homophobia." And they went through all my social media trying to find things that they felt were homophobic, and you can read the Google that article for yourself. It's none of it's homophobic, because I'm not. I just have safeguarding concerns about men in women's underwear dancing in front of kids.
Which is extremely reasonable, but common sense. And I'm wondering, I described this at the beginning as a spiritual war, and we've talked about being on the front line there as a doctor, seeing this and standing up. What part did God play in your awakening and your what you've done since?
It's been kind of a spiritual roller coaster, because in all of the events of the 5 years, it really was, again, part of my testimony as a Christian when I was really quite an aggressive atheist at med school. I used to debate all of the Muslims and Christians, and call them God botherers and stuff. I won't share the full testimony here, but one of the reasons was I looked at the Bible and its prophecy from Old to New Testament, and also I went through the Book of Acts on Google Maps and finding these places actually existed, and prophetic fulfillment really in the last 5 years has really sort of strengthened my faith, because there was some pretty interesting behaviour from churches during the pandemic. Churches shut the door just at the time of need of their flock. They shut the door and they started having silly rules. Like one of my churches that I went to had a rule where you had to wear the mask until you sang. You can take your mask off when you sing. And I'm like saying, no, you got that the wrong way around. You put it on when you sing because you're generating aerosols. But this is the flawed logic and inversion. But yeah, I mean, I was a zealous Christian to start with, and I started to sort of question churches and the people who go to them on a Sunday in their suits and their boots, and they forget about Christian living and the ethos. That's a human thing. But it's kind of took me away from churches, what I call churchiality. Also referred to in the Bible as Pharisees. I call a lot of the Christians Pharisees now, as per the Gospel of Matthew. There's a bit of scripture about that. But yeah, my faith in God is my faith in God. Churches disappoint me because as a young Christian, you were going to churches and saying, well, for example, Pentecostal churches saying, well, are you saved, Dr. Cartland? Are you saved? It's like, well, what do you mean by saved? Is it like a pass mark or what? Because last time I read the Bible, it said, by grace you are saved through faith, not by works, lest any man should boast. And you look at John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should have eternal life. And that's the gospel in a nutshell, isn't it? It's you don't need to go to church. You don't need to, pay your church management X amount of money every year. You've got to have a faith in God, and you've got to have a faith in the crucifixion and the resurrection. And that's it for me. It's no more than that. And I live that and breathe it and have a faith in God. And it's stronger than ever, ironically, despite the church being a big letdown, the body of people, let's say.
Well, I had a flashback there to a guy I met outside a cafe, 22, I think it was, 21. And he had a mask around his neck. And I said, he said he was on his way to church. And I said, well, what's that for? He said, oh, we've got to wear this in the church. I went, really? I said, do you believe in God then? And he said, yeah, of course I do. I said, well, did God get it wrong? And he went, what do you mean? I said, did God give you an immune system? He just didn't have a clue what
it was there. And like you say, if you've got faith in God, that let's say you die of coronavirus, well, you know where you're going.
Yeah.
You know where you're going. And it was so sad to watch my church. It was a really lovely evangelical Baptist church. And I was watching as everyone gets sick. In fact, I bumped into a guy only 2 days ago, one of the elders of the church, and I watched his health deteriorate. He's a lovely guy. He's developed a shake after the first jab. He kept going with each consecutive jab. He'd get worse shakes. Ended up after the fourth, despite me offering him spike protein detox protocols, he went into a doctor who said he's got Parkinson's, absolutely nothing to do with the vaccine, of course, and kept having them. And I met him in the street, and he said, oh, you're going to have to stand over there because I've gone blind in that eye. And I'm just like, oh, my God. And then another elder's got blood cancer, and they're all coming in with sticks, and I couldn't watch it anymore, Mark. I had to leave. I couldn't watch it because I wanted the pastor to stand up and say, privately he was agreeing with everything, but publicly, I know the pulpit's not about, this sort of stuff. It's about preaching the word of God. But actually, this is a safeguarding concern for your flock, your brothers and sisters in Christ. Tell them masks don't work. Tell them that this gene injection goes against creation. It's genetically altering God's creation. If you believe in Genesis and literally the first words of the Bible, then what are you doing allowing these Pfizer and AstraZeneca idiots to change your genetics, change the human bodily function, turn you into spike protein factories? Aside from all the other transgender stuff, I've never had support from the church for my position on trans ever. And I find it really hard because we've heard about Adam and Eve. I'll leave it at that.
Exactly. And now you went through this experience, you lost your job, you quit the job, and then you went on social media, and then everything started exploding because you have to point things out when you notice them, and there's no editing David Cartland, which has been, inspirational to a lot of people, but also attracted a massive amounts of attacks and trolls. Do you want to talk everybody through what's happened there? Because I said that you've been dragged over the coals, but that's actually a bit of an understatement in terms of what's happened to you, in terms of being sued by a famous TV doctor, going through the GMC, being struck off. Is that right?
Struck off, yeah. Danger to society. The conclusion was I was a danger to the profession. I brought the profession into disrepute, negatively affected public confidence, and it needed to be an immediate erasure. And the reason it was an immediate erasure, I mean, bearing in mind we've got doctors that are castrating female patients without their consent. We've got doctors with sexual offences, paedophilic offences, drugs and crimes and all sorts of it. Reprobate doctors, they get suspended. But Dave Cartland wrote 5 letters of support for vaccines and called out 3 doctors that, as far as I'm concerned, told lies to a massive proportion of the population using their platforms. And then I called out a practice for discrimination. So, you know, take me to prison, as it were. But yeah, I mean, I spoke out. I think the first venture into social media was Twitter. I was gradually being banned from all the other ones for just very benign sort of comments early on. But took to Twitter, and you know, you get suddenly swarmed. And I think anyone who's ever supported me publicly on X, Twitter, will know the group that I'm talking about. There's a group of very organised, coordinated trolls. I won't name names here, but one of the victims of me during the tribunal I was found guilty of, you know, I recorded about 700, 600 tweets about me. He called me everything from a schizophrenic, alcoholic, anything he could think of, ad hominem attacks, this guy. And he did it to other doctors. So I created two files, one of him abusing me, 600, abusing other doctors across the globe, calling them the same names he called me, 600. And then he went into the vaccine injury groups, calling them all malingerers and get a job and why you're lying about your husband's death and all the rest of it. So this was given to the GMC. GMC said, you're not allowed to use this evidence. You're not allowed any witnesses. I named 6 people that had borne witness to the trolls and how they'd behaved towards me. That actually, I was just a bear that had been poked and retaliated unwisely, as I admit I did. And what, you know, if you keep poking so many times and it's so many people, it's so constant day in, day out, abusing me ad hominem, contacting people in my life, my employers, my family, my ex-wife, my kids, you know, they didn't stop. And that's continued really since the strike off. But yeah, I was found to be the perpetrator of harassment of this doctor who's actually recently been kicked out of the Irish Medical Council for being exactly what he is. They actually received the same documentation that I sent to the GMC. And it led to them ejecting him from being the key witness for a case of one of the Irish doctors, Marcus de Brun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to the GMC and said, look, you know, I'm supposed to have harassed this guy, but he's just been booted out of the GMC, the Irish Medical Council, for being a non-credible witness and stuff about his qualifications that went through. And, you know, this needs to be looked at. In fact, they said that I didn't file a defence for the practice manager complaint. I've got 2 read receipts from the GMC saying they did receive it. They just either ignored it or lost it. So no defence was heard. But yeah, the trolls are persistent to this day. I mean, I've tried to put up with them, ignore them. You know, they say don't feed the trolls, but these trolls don't stop at X. One of the first things we did actually at the GMC was the barrister read out an email that they'd received ad verbatim. And I remember it to this day. I remember a lot of the details. It said, we are a group of scientists and doctors. Yeah. So they're always science or doctors, these trolls are, or ex-military is the other link. And they say, we are a group of scientists and doctors tasked with keeping misinformation regarding the COVID pandemic off social media. Dr. Cartland is a particularly obnoxious example of somebody who spreads dangerous misinformation on COVID or words to that effect, which is why he became a target of our network. And the person who had written the email had it blocked out by GMC, so I couldn't see who this character was. But they're all interlinked. They all work together. I mean, I've got about 15 of them full time at the moment posting about me. It's under police investigation, but they don't stop at the GMC. Mark, they've contacted the FA about me, Children's Services. They've transferred the strike off to DBS now, so they're looking at getting me on the banned list for working with children and vulnerable adults, which will be the end of my coaching and football refereeing, which I absolutely love. I want to progress in. You know, they contacted, like I say, family, neighbours. They've even took to physically stalking me. So I've gone to football matches to know that pictures have been taken of me refereeing. You know, they found out where I'm refereeing. Some have driven down all the way from Nottingham. Again, NHS staff, and taking pictures. And turning up at events. I was at an event in Wiltshire where one of them turned up and posted the fact they sat nav arriving at the event and sat seats away from me just to try and intimidate me. And it just goes on. I mean, there's nothing these guys won't do. I only did a video the other day about cannabis oil that I use to relax, CBD oil. Record it, and then within 2 days of me just walking along the beach saying, use a bit of cannabis oil for relaxing and insomnia, I get a letter from the ASA, Advertising Standards Agency, take it down, you're breaching that. I put a new website up, they've already complained to the ICO, and there's nothing I can do in any aspects of my life there. So yeah, I hope that gives you a flavour of kind of the multifaceted, persistent, they don't stop. So I don't know what the end goal is for me. I don't know if they want me to react aggressively so they can get police involved. I know I've been to the police myself. First time I went to the police about 6, I plucked up the courage to report 6 of them. And the cop said to me, oh, you saved us a trip. I said, sorry? What do you mean? Well, we've had 6 reports in 2 days that you've been harassing online and maliciously communicating with these 6 people. And they read out the 6 names that I'd gone into report. It's happening again now. There's another mass reporting to the police going on at the moment, trying to make me out to be the perpetrator. Look, I'm not a bully. I'm not a harasser. I actually hate bullies and harassers. I was bullied a lot at school. I stood up for the bullied at school. So to be struck off for harassment is just sick. It's like a twisted inversion of my character. And it's funny because all the locals that do know me in the vicinity of where I live, they all say, well, we're reading all this stuff about you in Cornwall Live. And, the tabloids had their pound of flesh, BBC, Daily Mail, etc. And, yeah, unrelenting, Mark. And yeah, we haven't touched on civil action. I can't really talk about that one, but
I know.
Civil action as well in the background, being sued, and that was the money that was set aside for my judicial review, which would have been about 50 grand crowdfunded, was snaffled, let's say, and that's all I can say.
You've written all down in the book, though, haven't you? Let's have a look at it.
Do you want to hold it up?
Yeah.
There we go. This is, I'll move it away. So this is Do No Harm, the diaries of a vaccinated anti-vaxxer. As you can see, the picture there is quite realistic. And as you can see, my name's been stamped off, Dr. David Cartland. By the way, I can still call myself Dr. David Cartland. It's an academic qualification. But yeah, it was instigated actually by a troll, one of the trolls on the internet, a well-known troll, and I won't name him, but I don't want to get in trouble. But yeah, he posted Cartland's legacy to his children will be his Google search. And that disturbed me for days. It really roiled me, thinking because I Googled myself and saw that it's not pretty reading. Cartland's a bully, harasser, inciter of hatred, transphobic, homophobic, dishonest. I mean, he sounds like a right scumbag, Dr. Cartland does. I wouldn't employ him. But anyway, I thought I'm gonna combat this with my magnum opus. This is it.
Well, I'm glad you have. Yep.
It's documented carefully, emotionally. It's a story of why I became a doctor, how I geared everything in my life to get in that medical school interview. I was at med school for 10 years. I did 2 degrees, a master's before I got into it. Dedicated every single moment at school towards it. And I talk about my motivations, and it wasn't money. It was about patients, safety, care, cradle to grave medicine. I wanted to be that old school GP that I used to go and see back in the 80s, 90s. And then I take you through my early career, take you through some of the characters that I came across, some of the egos, some of the narcissism, discuss a bit about the bullying culture, cover up the encouragement of whistleblowers until you whistleblow and then you're out on your backside. And then we go into the COVID era in earnest and just describe the nightmare really in terms of the whole process. I've tried not to linger too much on details, but it was a kangaroo court. Anyone who reads a book will know. To not have any witnesses, to have even my own witness bundle, pages and pages. I'd even put them into little chapters for them, annexes, made it very simple. They lost half of it. And the other bit of it, they said, well, 80% of it's not relevant. So they'd gone over my own words in my own defense with like black blocks, like a FISA document. But you can't use your own words in your own defense. And we were saying, look, this is wild. This is against the Human Rights Act for starters. Fair trial, freedom of speech. Let him defend himself. No. Dave Cartland said this to this doctor. Yeah, but why did he say it? Oh, no, we don't care why he said it. So I don't know if I can swear on this.
Yeah, of course you can.
I called one of the guys who is one of the leaders of this group. I said, leave me alone, you sheep shagger. Yeah, that's what I said, because he's a sheep farmer. GMC, get ready for this. GMC turned it into a charge of Dr. Cartland has accused a fellow scientist of having a sexual interest in animals, including
Oh
beastie.
my God.
You can see it on the NHS documentation.
You see, demons don't have a sense of humour.
No, you can't. I mean, what I presented to the GMC was that all of the harassment that I dished out allegedly was retaliation. That was my defence. These people were poking and poking, and it wasn't just the 3 people. It was the whole network around them. Every day, personal, ad hominem, nasty slurs, contacting people in my life. It turned into physical stalking in the end. I'd go to a beach. They'd post the webcam of the beach I was at. I'd go and work at a surgery 3 hours away. They'd get a nuisance call saying, just to let you know, that doctor who works there. So they were obviously following me or tagging me or monitoring somehow. I don't know how they do this, but I've pissed off some powerful people. I know that for sure. And I really didn't think when I took that step to speak out, having had it myself, that it would lead to this. But yeah, it's all in the book, and I actually had to have a break. And the last chapter took me some time. I had writer's block, let's say, because the whole thing had just damaged me mentally. I mean, I was being called publicly called danger to the public for what? For calling out safety concerns. That's not. They're saying I'd negatively affected public confidence when all I was hearing privately was, well, we've come to you, Dave, because we don't trust anyone else in the NHS. So yeah, it took me about 4 or 5 months after to write that last chapter. And I think there were tears on the pages as I was writing it. I still haven't come to terms with it, if I'm honest, Mark, because it's been my life's calling to be a doctor. I don't think I could be in the NHS again because working with these people, but it's the reputational slander, the discrediting, it's the injustice as well. I don't mind at this age of my life, 43, putting my hand up, say, yeah, okay, I did say some inappropriate stuff to these particular doctors. I admit when I'm wrong, but my God, I was baited. My God, I was provoked. My God, this has been I've never known, I don't know anyone who gets trolled any worse than me. And anyone who, if you popped on X now and said Dave Cartland's a legend, you'll meet this crew. You'll meet this group. They're well documented. They go around bullying day in, day out. You've met them. I know everyone that we mutually know has met them. And then they don't meet them in a friendly way. They meet them because they're piled on, harassed and bullied. And the GMC just didn't want to hear about it. You called him a sheepshagger. You've accused a scientist of bestiality. This is despicable behaviour. I was like, no, hang on. But he's put all these 600 tweets out about me, calling me Harold Shipman on steroids and should be in a padded cell and I'm this, that and the other.
But they just want one thing. They pin it all on one thing.
So no, he's subject to a separate regulator. You put in a complaint about him. So I did start putting complaints about harassment I'd received. One of my defences was, I've got 3 doctors I've reported to you, the GMC. One of them was a death threat, saying I'm going to come to Cornwall and hunt you down and slit your bleeping throat. Put it into the GMC and they say it's not reached the threshold for investigation. I've just sent another one into the GMC about an anaesthetist in Portsmouth who's just been posting about me. Don't know him, never worked with him. 100 and odd tweets about me, really derogatory and abusive. Oh, we can't find him on the register, Dr. Cartland, so we're closing this down. It's like, what? I found him in about 30 seconds. I just typed his name into the GMC register. So there's an aversion to this 2-tier thing, isn't it? The anti-vaxxers will get rid of them. We'll find that one thing and twist it. But the pro-vax cult, they're all protected. I've seen it myself. And I wasn't even allowed to use that in my evidence bundle. They said that was irrelevant and inadmissible.
Dave, where can people get the book from?
So 3 ways really. So I'm buying a big batch to post out for people who don't want to purchase from sort of the big companies. Amazon have got it. It's selling well. It's got to number 1 on 3 different domains: medical biographies and GP and nursing, and another one that I can't remember, medical reference. It's doing really well on Amazon. And Waterstones have just stopped it for some reason. We've broken Waterstones, so that's a statement listing. There it is on Amazon. And as you'll notice there, the star rating, just to mention trolling again. So there's a star rating. Every person who's bought the book has given it 5 stars, but for one who gave it 4. And then you'll see there's a load of 1 stars. If you want to, you can do that now just to see the trolling. You can go to the ratings. Go.
Terrible. Quite aside from the astronomical levels of misinformation this contains, it's appallingly badly written and makes false claims about why the author was erased. Unbelievable.
Please visit NPTS. So they kept dropping the NPTS tribunal hearing on it. So all the 1-star reviews, they're all unverified purchases. But look, 19%. Waste of money.
Money.
These people haven't. You notice there's normally it says verified purchase. Not one of these is a verified purchase.
Nearly the Pink Panther for our time. Oh my God.
They've got some imaginations, these cretins. He's one of my Twitter trolls there, Kerno Kevin. He's local to me. He follows me around a bit, yeah.
Which one's that? That one?
Kerno Kevin, this one, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're just basically identifying themselves as Satanists, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, mental. Yeah, that's it. And just to plug the other one, the other book, if that's all right.
Yeah.
This is a poetry collection. So we've kind of rebooted that from our original book launch. I think you've written in this, haven't you, Mark?
I think, am I in it? I think I am. Yeah.
I think you've written a poem, I think, off the top of my head, but we've kind of we've made it a bit nicer, the cover. I'll say it was Jane Angel, just to give her a plug.
Yeah, nice one, Jane.
Rewrote it, put a few extras for me. I've included my COVID cultist poem, my keyboard warrior poem. There's another one called Blind Obedience. So you get the gist of where I'm going with the poetry. And that was kind of born out of insomnia. I wasn't sleeping, so I decided to write some books, to write some poetry in the middle of the night. And
I know all about that.
Yeah, I was sat in bed at 3 o'clock, writing rhyming couplets down and trying to make it fit into these scathing comments about what a bargain! Look, €10, 28.
Well, so I just want to say to everybody watching this, get both of these books and buy multiple copies and send them to all of your asleep relatives and friends and colleagues, and especially David's biography there, because I have been a big proponent about books being one of the most powerful ways. I mean, you can send a video to people, they just won't watch it if they don't agree with it. But if a book arrives as a Christmas present, they have to look at it. Right? And that's why books are so powerful. Go and buy multiple copies and send them to multiple people in your family and friends and colleagues. That's my advice.
That's my vision, really. Every doctor, every nurse, every jaboteur worker.
Send one to your local doctor.
This is why we made them so cheap. I mean, we don't get rich from this, believe me. I know that. £1.50 for a book and sort of whatever. I don't know how many we sold, but we made it a nice short book. It's not that thick. It's a nice striking cover on the biography, as you can see, with a pretty powerful message. And the vision was really to get it bought by as many people as possible, to cause some ripples. We don't get many chances on our side of the debate to cause statements, to make statements happen that make the other side question. And this is one of them. This is an opportunity for people to say, look, whatever my views on Dave Cartland's vaccine, position is, that they treated him appallingly. This is a miscarriage of justice. This is criminal behaviour here. That even the hardened vax cultists should see that through the book. It's very gentle. It talks about, like I say, my wish to be a doctor, why and how I geared my life to it. From the day I picked up a plastic stethoscope as a 5-year-old kid in the nursery, that's how long the dream has been there. And I'm 43 now, with 25 years left to give. And
you're not done yet. You're not done yet. And you guys watching, this is an example of you've heard his story, and this is what we need, right? This has been a rough period for all doctors that have stood up. Really rough. It's been rough for all of us that have stood up, but the doctors in particular lost position in society, career, reputation, income, everything. And that's why I love you, David, and I think it's really important that you're doing what you're still here, thank God, and I want you to stay here. Now, at the moment, you have drdavidcartland.com as well, which
what a handsome chap. Look at that. I think they've photoshopped all the stress lines out of me, I think. But yeah, this is the new health coaching. So obviously, when you're struck off, the first thing I did was ask the GMC what I can and can't do. I've asked them 3 times now because I've never been struck off before, but they still haven't answered. So all this medical knowledge, it's in there. But basically, people book in with me because they've chosen to come to me. They've lost trust in the NHS, or they know about my stand, and they opt to speak to me about a medical issue. I will give my opinion, often over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And it's that informality of having, a prolonged period of time, telling me the story, the case history. And I'll just tell you what I would have done if I was a doctor in the conventional sense. So I'll signpost people to a service, or say, well, yeah, that rectal bleeding needs to be looked at. You need a 2-week wait from your doctor. Go and see them urgently. And it's going really well. It's steadily picked up. We had some trial action on the old website. So hence this new reconfiguration. So it's fairly protected from any external influences. And yeah, bookings are picked up. A little bit about me personally on the website as well. Just Dave Cartland the human, Dave Cartland the dad, the books as well.
Well,
And
I think
I'm just there for somebody who needs to have a second opinion or medical jargon busting. Or one this morning was she just wanted to check that the treatment she'd had was in keeping with standard protocol. And I can sell my opinion at the end of the day. I'm not allowed to treat, as in diagnose or issue medications, and that's as far as my research has said to me. That's all, and that's what I can say. I'm not in the business of giving people pills anymore and pharmacia. On the left here are a pile of books you can't see off camera, but they're all naturopathic, about ecological medicine, natural stuff, supplements, dietary stuff, nutrition, stuff that was absent, conspicuously absent from the medical curriculum.
Well, that's the beautiful thing. A whole new world of knowledge has opened up, and you can build it on top of all that medical knowledge and that love for taking care of people. And if you guys, and you can do this internationally.
Yeah, it's a Zoom-based thing at the moment. I think if it builds to a certain size, then I'll have a clinic. And health coaching is what it is. It's coaching you in your health. You're not allowed to give medical advice, they say on the CQC websites, but I'm having a conversation like we're having a conversation now. People will, take my opinion or leave it. Often I'll say, go and see the doctor. You need to see a doctor about this symptom. You need to have a head scan, etc. But I've got a brain. I still own that at the moment, and probably not after 2030. But I own my thoughts, and the grey matter within the skull is mine to impart knowledge towards people. And I can give knowledge. I'll referee. I'll give coaching advice out at the weekend to children on the pitch. I'm allowed to give advice. That's given. But yeah, the other thing I'm doing is sort of sharing the story of other fellow whistleblowers now. So I've got a project on YouTube where at the moment I'm just kind of reposting the back catalogue of interviews. But the principal idea is to again, a bit like the book, is set my position in history and post all my old interviews up. So it's the archive of all the interviews where I ever spoke out to say grandkids, great-grandkids, granddad did a semi-decent job, hopefully, of raising some awareness, and he had a role. And then the second thing is the vaccine injured series I've done. So I've got loads of people that have queued up really around the corner to speak to me about their case, vignettes of what the vaccine did to them, and some of the shenanigans with the vaccine damage payment scheme, and some of the treatment they get. I mean, you've got to watch the interviews. They should be really covered on mainstream media, which I doubt they will. But and then
down to us.
The final strand then is the conversations with first-time whistleblowers. So as I was stood in the wilderness, these people have got stories to tell. So I've ended up chatting to big pharma, ex-big pharma staff, ex-nurses, and it's always ex. They've had to either been sacked, pushed out, or retired to feel that they can safely speak out on these matters. And there's a wide range of conversations that we have. Like I say, you'll see there's some of the old interviews there with Matt. Let's say Andrew there, who's ex-farmer, got pushed out just from, you'll see in the interview, just he didn't really cause major waves. He's just quoting common sense, safety principles, and out the door he went.
Well, I'm working with Andrew now. Thank you.
Yes, no, that's good. And you were made for each other, really, in terms of what you're both doing, and you both have your ethoses. So I'm glad that's working out. But yeah, everything I've done, really, I've stuck on there until it gets banned. So please do like and subscribe, as they say. It's slow to build, but it's the only way you can get your stories out these days, because I'd have thought a mainstream media worth their salt would take my side of the story. They were happy to post one side of the corruption, but not even take a short statement from me. The only people that did, ironically, was the BBC. They wrote an article and they gave me about 2 lines at the bottom saying whatever, I can't remember now. But yeah, I'm just upset that there's no interest really in this plight, really.
There is interest. It's growing. That's why I said the thing at the beginning. I think the dam is going to break. You will be judged to be on the right side of history. What we want you to do in the meantime is take care of yourself, right? Don't let the bastards get you down. To all the trolls that are watching this that have affected David Cartland, your time will come. Believe me. And I thank you for everything that you're doing. And you guys watching, remember, go and get the books. Buy them, send them to your local GP, send them to your friends and family and your colleagues, because it's all very well sat here in a yellow jumper talking about vaccines being bad for people, but you need to hear it from an actual GP, not me. So thank you, David.
Disgraced ex-GP is what the Google search says. I laugh when I talk about it, but it's pretty sick at the end of the day. You just got to accept it. I've gone through a real grief reaction, and I think I'm in the anger phase today. The anger phase.
No, I understand that. So, we're all supporting you. Most of my subscribers, all my subscribers, will be supporting you, and the ones that aren't, fuck them.
No, but it's been good to chat, Mark. You've been really supportive, and thank you for that.
Man, my pleasure. Thanks for coming, David. Thanks everybody for watching. See you later.